To begin this presentation, I will briefly introduce the history of Forton. The very first time where human activity was seen on the site dates to the early Bronze Age, with the best evidence found being stone scrapers, such as the ones positioned on the top right corner of this slide. However, even with this early presence of humans in the location, there is no further evidence of the use of Forton Lake throughout the Iron Age or the Roman period. It is believed that Romans were aware of the site, as the surrounding areas of Porchester Castle and Fareham have known Roman presence, but there are no settlements placed around Forton Lake that are known. The following settlement, known to archaeologists, correspond to the Saxon period, but whether they used the area of the lakes, it is unknown. The first activity around Forton Lake itself dates to 1268. The Forton Mill, represented on the image to the right, was built and became a key part of the local community. After the construction of Forton Mill, the area became much more prominent, with the mill itself being in use from the medieval period until the middle of the 19th century. Owned by the Bishop of Winchester during this period, it was used as a tide mill to grind grains from local farmers, who would be taxed accordingly. The lake also became an important area, being a good location to dock boats, and in 1665, after the Restoration, a large shipbuilding company program for the King's Navy was established and brought importance to the area. Forton became the site for a hospital for some time, and the lake a prime location for prison hulks of the Napoleonic War and American War of Independence. Some of the prison hulks which were docked are believed to be part of the wrecks found on the lake today. Forton used to be a much larger area, reaching out to the creek in Mill Road as mapped by Milne in 1791. After Forton Mill was sold in 1858, the area slowly became less used and the mill fell into disrepair. By World War II, the site became a military establishment and land had been reclaimed through time, with housing and other developments being built around. After World War II, the lake became prime location for beached vessels to be disposed of, and the boats analysed in the archaeological project mostly date from the 20th century war periods. Prior to 2006, very little archaeological work had been carried out in Forton Lake. With the local heritage demanding care, the project was planned and managed by the NAS, the Nautical Archaeology Society, and the MAT, the Maritime Archaeology Trust. With the assistance from a group of maritime archaeologists and volunteers, the fieldwork project was able to be completed within 3 years, between 2006 and 2009. Before beginning their work, the archaeological team set out 3 important goals for the fieldwork project: to investigate the developing archaeological landscape of Forton Lake, to raise awareness of the archaeology of Forton Lake, and to involve the local community in investigating their heritage of Forton Lake. With little prior knowledge about the site, a series of surveys and local research were undertaken before fieldwork could progress. In attempts to identify the ships, the following sources were used: discussions with the locals about the heritage, oral history, library and other archives, including historical photographs. An initial survey of 31 vessels was completed, both ashore and on the intertidal zone, with those being either above mud or just below it. Some ships were investigated through conventional surveys, and others required archaeological excavation. After the initial survey, a map was able to be plotted with every site that would be analysed, which is seen on this slide. With the size and shape of each hulk recorded, it was possible to begin identifying a few of the vessels. Elements that make up the hull, fixtures and fittings were described with the correct maritime terms. A photographic survey was also undertaken to catalogue what each vessel looked like and what was its size. The map presented here is a site guide produced by the Maritime Archaeology Trust for the public outreach publication that was written after the fieldwork was completed. It provides a good idea of where the ships are located and exactly how many were able to be identified with the help of locals and volunteers. These are a few photographs taken during fieldwork, where it is possible to see the maritime archaeologists, the students and the volunteers working on the boat surveys on site. From this slide onwards, a few of the vessels identified throughout fieldwork will be discussed. From the identified vessels, it was possible to obtain a range of 150 years of British naval history portrayed through the wrecks. There are examples of barges, ferries, and warships from both world wars, as well as 2 lifeboats amongst the ones identified. The lake is very rich in naval heritage, and it is very important to highlight that there are still several unidentified vessels, which allows for a future archaeological investigation project to be proposed. The vessel seen on this slide is a World War II minesweeper that saw service in Normandy as part of the D-Day force being paid off in November 1950. She was launched on the 3rd of June 1943 and throughout the project was known as FL3. The most common vessel type represented at Forton Lake is the landing craft assault. These boats were used for transportation of troops during amphibious assaults on beaches during World War II, with a large number constructed prior to the Normandy invasion of 1944. The photo shows the wreckage of FL-16, one of the LCAs that was surveyed as part of the first year of the Forton Lake archaeology project in 2006. Through a simple photographic survey, basic length and breadth measurements, observations of structural remains, and recording the positional information using a handheld GPS, key pieces of information were able to be collected about this wreck. With a length of 8.73 meters and a width of 2.66 meters, FL-16 was identified as a landing craft. Much of the external metal planking of the vessel is present, and inspection of the hull demonstrated the presence of an internal timber skin. This vessel, located on the south bank of Forton Lake, probably represents the remains of a Second World War RAF ferryboat. The photograph to the right was taken in the 1980s by David Fricker, and on the left is the 2007 photo from the second year of the fieldwork project. Ferryboats were used by the RAF to transport people, cargo, and munitions to the RAF flying boats. The 40 feet long vessel was constructed between 1944 and 1946. This particular one had both its bow and stern remains intact, and therefore was able to be fully measured, with about 13 meters long and 1.75 meters wide. It is complete with an external iron sheeting, which has been welded, and a thin wooden planking laid in the interior of the boat. Throughout the 3 years of fieldwork, only 3 vessels required excavation: FL5, FL15, and FL29. These were all wooden vessels and were potentially the oldest within Forton Lake. The excavation allowed for their size, form, and construction to be determined. The photo seen on this slide is of FL5 before the excavation began. Only a few timbers could be seen above the mud. The hull of FL5 is wooden and carvo built. The hull, being almost completely flat bottom, meant that it was able to sail more easily within statuary and river environments, which are often shallower, and, because of this, the framing of it is relatively complex. Throughout the excavation, a lot of different information gathered about the vessel, and because of it, it is believed that FL5 could date between the mid-19th century to early 20th century, but no concrete conclusion has been achieved. The identity of FL15 remains a mystery, as during the excavation there was a limited nature of results obtained and no further research has happened around the vessels. FL15 lies closely to FL5, but more of this vessel was visible above the foreshore before the excavation, so it was possible to see its outline. The result of the excavation revealed a carvel-built wooden vessel with its total length being unknown as the bow was covered under the mud. However, it is known that the wider section measures around 20 feet. The exact period of construction and use of FL15 remains uncertain, but the constructional features of the vessel suggest a mid-19th and early 20th century date, which would make it closely related to FL5. Because of the detailed work undertaken by the archaeologists and volunteers, a team was able to return to the site and create a 3D model of one of the vessels identified. The 3D model seen on this video was created through the use of photogrammetry, a method that allows for further research and visual inspection of the finds in situ, meaning it can be analyzed without removing it from its original location. The barge FL-17 was identified as a steam pinnace, which were communication vessels that were used by the Navy for the transfer of small stores and personnel to larger ships that lay at anchor. The online model seen here is available for analysis on the MAT webpage about the Forton Lake wrecks. With the completion of the archaeological project, it is possible to say that it was a successful venture. With the identification of some wrecks, new knowledge was produced about the heritage of the site, which, in turn, increased local awareness on the conservation of the local maritime heritage. It is hoped that further research will help shed more light on the remaining rich heritage. With the return to one of the sites to produce the 3D model, this was just one of the few possibilities of archaeological work and research that is available for future professionals to pursue about the location. If you enjoyed this short presentation and would like to learn more information on the project and the results, make sure to visit the MAT's website and download the booklet that was produced alongside NAS after the completion of the project. The link to download it can be found below. Once again, thank you for watching this presentation. It has been a pleasure to teach you about the Forton Lake wrecks.